Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. The kettle whistled while the clock hit 10. Tyler moved around the kitchen with a politeness that felt rehearsed. His eyes kept sliding over his shoulder toward me, checking my mood like a weather report. I pretended to scroll through my phone but watched every teaspoon he touched. The air smelled of chamomile and something metallic that made my stomach knot. When he added honey, his hand shook and a drop landed on the counter. In that quiver I saw not nerves of care but nerves of calculation. He set the mug in front of me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I thanked him, letting my voice sound brittle, as if the day had worn me out. Inside, alarm screamed so loud I could taste copper. I stirred the tea once, watching faint white dust rise like smoke. My heart tried to claw out of my chest, yet my face held the same soft lines mothers wear at bedtime. I lifted the cup, letting steam kiss my cheeks, and prayed my hand would not tremble. Tyler lingered in the doorway, waiting for the show to start. The powder never fully dissolved, it clung to the surface like pollen after rain. While Tyler rummaged for his phone charger, I tilted the cup just enough to skim liquid into a houseplant. The leaves shivered when the drops hit, and I wondered if plants could dream. Each second felt elastic, stretching so far I feared it would snap and expose me. My pulse slammed against my eardrums, drowning the hum of the fridge. I forced a yawn, pretending the tea relaxed me. He glanced back, satisfied, and disappeared into the hall. I walked to the sink, back turned to the corridor, and poured the rest down the drain in one silent motion. Foam formed where the tea met steel, confirming poison I could not name. I rinsed the mug, returned to the couch, and let my body go limp. The room spun, but only from fear, not from the drug he expected to conquer me. In that stillness I memorized the pattern on the ceiling because it might become my alibi. I slowed my breathing, counting to 5 on every exhale, the way my therapist had taught me. Somewhere nearby I heard him open a closet, already planning tomorrow's tragedy. Minutes later Tyler's footsteps crept past the couch, light as a thief. I felt his eyes sweep over what he thought was a sedated body and resisted the urge to flinch. When he left, I cracked one eyelid and confirmed I was alone. My phone lay on the coffee table within reach, glowing with missed messages. I slid it under the throw blanket, opened the recorder app, and hit the red circle. The decision was no longer about survival alone, it was about justice. I promised myself I would walk through fire to expose whatever came next. The house settled around me, wood popping in the night heat, but every sound felt scripted. Upstairs, a door clicked and I heard Tyler's voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. Brooke answered through the speaker, her tone giddy like someone choosing vacation outfits. They spoke of routes a burglar would take, items to smash, windows to leave ajar. My recording rolled while rage built a fortress behind my ribs. I imagined tomorrow's headlines and swore I would write a different story. With each vile detail they shared, my fear hardened into an armor no drug could penetrate. I stayed motionless on the couch for nearly an hour, letting my breathing slow to mimic deep sleep. Every creak in the house, every distant car passing by, made my skin crawl. Tyler checked on me twice, standing over me long enough that I could feel his presence through closed eyelids. I almost flinched when he touched my shoulder lightly, testing. But I didn't move, didn't react, and after a few seconds, he walked away. I waited until the silence settled like fog before reaching for my phone again. My hand shook as I reviewed the audio, confirming I had every word of their conversation recorded. I saved the file, emailed a backup to myself, then hid the phone deep under the couch cushion. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew I couldn't sleep, not truly. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I wasn't just playing dead anymore, I was surviving hour by hour. Tomorrow, I had to act, but tonight, I had to keep breathing. Just before midnight, I heard Tyler on the phone again, pacing softly in the hallway. "She's definitely out," he whispered, and Brooke's voice buzzed through the speaker. They talked logistics, what time Brooke would arrive, what tools she'd bring, how long they'd need. Tyler suggested smashing a window after to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Brooke laughed like it was a game, not a plan to kill his own mother. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to listen. Brooke said she'd bring gloves and something quick and quiet. Tyler agreed, then mentioned they'd need to move fast once it was done. They debated whether to burn some documents to distract investigators. Every word felt like a knife, and I recorded all of it, barely breathing. The son I raised, who I once rocked to sleep during thunder, was plotting my death with a woman who spoke of it like a weekend project. I held on to the sound of their voices not with fear, but with purpose. They hung up shortly after, and I stayed still until I was sure Tyler had gone to bed. Then I sat up and transferred the new recording to the cloud, labeling it with the date and time. I backed it up on a flash drive I kept in the sewing drawer and hid it beneath a stack of old patterns. My body was exhausted, but my mind ran wild, calculating next steps. I couldn't go to the police empty-handed, and now I didn't have to. I had names, plans, intent, and my own son's voice spelling out my murder. I waited until the first light of morning cracked through the blinds before I stood and went to the mirror. I looked at my reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, but determined, and whispered to myself that I would survive. Not just for justice, but because I refused to let them win. I made a cup of coffee, my first in years, and drank it black while staring at the front door. Today I would find someone who believed me. Today I would begin fighting back. I left the house that morning without saying a word to Tyler, telling him I had a doctor's appointment. My voice stayed steady, but my palms were soaked with sweat as I clutched my purse where the flash drive was hidden. I didn't look back as I drove toward the city, afraid that if I met his eyes, he'd know I was onto him. I kept replaying his words in my mind, the casual cruelty of it, the finality. I knew this wasn't just about money, it was about control, about wiping me out cleanly. But I also knew I still had time, and I had evidence. That thought alone kept me from breaking down at every red light. By the time I reached the old police precinct, my hands had stopped shaking, but my throat was dry. I asked for Detective Morales, hoping he still worked there after all these years. A young officer called to the back, then motioned for me to wait. 10 minutes later, Morales walked out, older but unmistakable, and when he saw my face, his expression changed. He led me into his office without a word. The moment the door closed, I broke. I told him everything, voice cracking but steady, and he didn't interrupt me once. I handed Morales the flash drive and played the audio on my phone, watching his face turn from disbelief to something colder. The words Tyler and Brooke spoke left no room for doubt. He paused the file halfway through and picked up the phone, calling someone from the fraud division. Then he asked if I still had the cup with the tea, and I nodded. I had rinsed it, but the residue might still be there. Morales looked at me like I wasn't a victim, but a survivor. He said I had done everything right. He promised they would move fast. He asked if I felt safe going home, and I said no. He told me to stay somewhere else for now, maybe with a friend, and I nodded again. He'd send someone to collect the mug and place surveillance near the house. I couldn't believe how quickly things were turning, but I also knew we weren't out of danger yet. Tyler wasn't dumb, and if he suspected anything, he could snap. Morales assured me they'd move before he did. As I left his office, the weight in my chest shifted, not gone, but no longer crushing me. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, paid in cash, and locked the door behind me twice. I paced the small room until my legs ached, then finally collapsed onto the bed. Sleep didn't come, only fragments of nightmares mixed with Brooke's laughter and Tyler's voice calling me mom like it meant nothing. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking of the years I spent raising him, the sacrifices, the birthdays, the scraped knees I kissed. How had we gotten here? How had love turned into this? As the sun broke over the horizon, I sat at the edge of the bed and made a list in my notebook. Everything I knew, everything they said, everything I still needed to protect. Morales said they'd act soon, but my heart didn't believe in safety yet. I sipped motel coffee and watched the news, waiting for a headline that hadn't come. Part of me still wanted to believe this wasn't real. But the recording said otherwise. My son wanted me dead, and now the whole truth was out there. Dana sat under fluorescent lights in the urgent care exam room, the antiseptic smell stinging her nostrils as the nurse drew a second vial of blood, muttering about routine panels. She kept her eyes fixed on the cartoon fish wallpaper, praying the technician would find proof that the chalky residue hadn't been a nightmare. 20 minutes later the doctor returned, clipboard trembling just enough to betray his calm as he explained that her saliva showed zolpidem far above therapeutic range. Dana's stomach lurched, but the shock hardened into resolve because science had just confirmed what her heart already knew. She signed consent for the sample to be sealed and logged as evidence, hearing the click of the seal like a gavel. Before leaving, she asked the doctor for printed results and slipped the papers into the same pocket that once held Tyler's childhood drawings. Outside, drizzle coated the windshield while she called Morales, voice low but urgent, and relayed the numbers exactly as the doctor had written them. Morales swore softly, promised to add the report to the burgeoning case file, and told her to drive straight to the precinct so forensics could collect the cup. Dana gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles blanched, feeling every mile stretch like taffy as she imagined Tyler at home counting on her unconsciousness. When she parked behind the precinct, an evidence tech met her with gloves and an evidence bag, treating her kitchen mug like a loaded gun. The residue scraped from its inner rim matched the lab sheet she'd folded in her purse, closing the scientific loop. For the first time in 24 hours Dana's fear found a partner in undeniable fact, and together they began to look a lot like justice. While the mug was being processed, Morales tapped at his keyboard and pulled Dana into a side office where a fraud division agent patched in by video to explain the digital trail. 6 weeks earlier, a life insurance application for $2 million had been submitted online using Dana's name and social security number, the premium paid with a debit card in Tyler's name. The electronic signature matched one on Dana's mortgage, copied and pasted with clumsy pixels still visible when magnified, and the IP address traced straight back to their home Wi-Fi. Dana felt a cold rush, equal parts anger and heartbreak, as she watched her life reduced to a policy number on the screen. The agent noted that the contestability period ended in 24 days, meaning a natural-looking death before then would still pay out without heavy scrutiny. Morales printed the audit report, stamped it fraud suspected, and added it to the growing stack of evidence. Dana stared at the papers, realizing her son had not only priced her life but timed her death with actuarial precision. Morales slid the file across the desk for her to read and asked if she recognized the beneficiary's phone number, the same burner line Tyler used when he whispered with Brooke. Dana's pulse hammered so loudly she almost missed the agent explaining that the policy included an accidental death rider worth an extra $500,000 if foul play couldn't be proven. She wondered whether Tyler had rehearsed grief in the mirror, planning crocodile tears for a claims adjuster. With every paragraph she read, love curdled further into something unrecognizable, yet her spine straightened because outrage steadied her better than fear ever could. Morales photocopied her driver's license to attach as proof of identity fraud and promised his next call would be to the district attorney. Dana clenched her jaw, gripping the armrests as if bracing for turbulence, and whispered that she was ready for whatever came next. Assistant District Attorney Collins arrived within the hour, trench coat damp from the drizzle, and swept into the conference room carrying a legal pad already scrawled with notes. He listened without interruption as Morales presented the audio files, the toxicology report, and the insurance fraud evidence, his jaw tightening each time Tyler's voice played through the speaker. When the last recording ended, Collins exhaled sharply, declared probable cause on attempted murder and conspiracy, and said they would move tonight before the couple's plan advanced another inch. He authorized a covert sting, green-lighting full surveillance and a no-knock warrant if Tyler tried to administer another dose. Dana felt both exposed and protected, like someone stepping onto a stage beneath blinding lights with the entire law at her back. Collins turned to her, voice gentler, and assured her that victims who fight this hard rarely lose in his courtroom. The promise wrapped around her like a bulletproof vest, reminding her that courage was now a shared commodity. Logistics snapped into place with military speed. Undercover cars would sit on her street, a warrant application would hit the night judge's desk, and an evidence team would gear up to record every second inside the house. Collins requested Dana stay off-grid until the operation ended and handed her a prepaid phone for secure contact. She accepted it, feeling the weight of new numbers and new hope in her palm. As she gathered her things, Morales squeezed her shoulder, saying the hardest part, believing her own eyes, was already behind her. Dana nodded, swallowing the tremor in her throat, and stepped into the hallway where fluorescent lights suddenly seemed a little less harsh. Outside the precinct, thunder rolled distant and low, but for the first time since the poison tea touched her lips, the storm sounded like it might finally break in her favor. By late afternoon, a plain white van parked discreetly across the street while two tech agents entered Dana's home disguised as pest control. They moved quickly, placing a micro camera behind the picture frame in the living room and a second one in the hallway near the kitchen. A high-frequency microphone was embedded in the smoke detector, and a third agent ran cables to a nearby router to stream the footage in real time. Dana stood back, silent, watching strangers transform her home into a live crime scene. The place that once held Christmas mornings and birthday dinners now carried the cold scent of betrayal and surveillance. When they finished, the lead agent nodded, confirming everything was in place, and Dana thanked them with a voice that felt too small for everything she had survived. Before leaving, Morales handed her a small earpiece and said they'd be listening all night. She would go back home, act normal, and wait for Tyler to make his next move. Every inch of her body protested the idea of returning to that house, but she knew this was the only way to end it. She drove back as the sun dipped behind the trees, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Her breath fogged the window as she parked and walked inside, the smell of cinnamon still lingering from the morning tea. Tyler was already in the kitchen, asking how her appointment went, and she smiled as if everything was fine. She sat at the table, playing her part, waiting for the performance that would finally destroy his. Dinner was meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Tyler's favorite, cooked by his own hand as if nothing had happened. He talked about a movie he wanted to stream, about bills that were due, about everyday things that now felt grotesque in their banality. Dana responded politely, nodding, laughing in all the right places, though each bite of food turned her stomach. Every word he spoke carried a second layer now, one she couldn't ignore. He was waiting, she knew, for the perfect moment, when she was too tired, too trusting, too unaware. But tonight, she wasn't any of those things. After dinner, she loaded the dishwasher with shaking hands, her back turned as Tyler poured her a fresh cup of tea. He added sugar without asking and placed it on the table, steam curling above the rim. Her fingers hovered over the mug before she picked it up, lifting it just enough to mimic a sip. Then she smiled, thanked him, and set it down slowly, tapping her fingers against the ceramic in a rhythm the surveillance team would recognize. Tyler reclined on the couch, feet up, remote in hand, completely unaware that his countdown had already begun. Dana wiped her hands on a towel, walked into the living room, and sat beside him as the clock ticked louder than ever before. Tyler excused himself after a while, heading upstairs with a yawn and a promise to lock up later. Dana waited 5 full minutes, then stood and carried the mug to the sink, pouring its contents down the drain with the same precision she used the night before. This time, she didn't rinse it. Instead, she set it aside on a clean plate, exactly as instructed, preserving the residue. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, a signal from Morales, copy received. The tea was already on camera, already catalogued as live evidence, already damning. She turned off the lights, locked her bedroom door, and lay on top of the covers fully clothed. Her heart didn't slow, not even with the lights out. She stared at the ceiling, listening for creaks in the hallway, for keys turning in locks, for the sound of a man about to lose everything. But the house was still. Somewhere across the street, officers watched every frame. Dana's eyes burned from exhaustion, but her mind refused sleep. If Tyler came back with something worse than tea, she needed to be ready. And this time, she wouldn't pretend to sleep. She'd be wide awake when the truth knocked him down. At exactly 10:43 p.m., Dana tapped the edge of her mug twice before placing it back on the table, her fingers steady despite the weight behind the signal. Across the street, the unmarked van lit up with motion as Morales leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Tyler was in the hallway upstairs, whistling to himself as if murder were just part of the evening routine. Dana returned to the living room, heart pounding, acting like nothing had shifted. But the moment those taps landed, her life was no longer in his hands, it was in the hands of justice. She sat down on the couch, legs crossed, flipping through channels with fake interest while her body burned with tension. Each second stretched like wire pulled too tight, waiting to snap. She knew they wouldn't wait long now, not after that cue. Her gaze stayed fixed on the screen, but her ears were tuned to every creak from the floor above. Tyler's footsteps began to move again, slowly, as if sensing something had changed in the air. And then, suddenly, everything did. The front door flew open with a thunderous crash, and Dana jumped even though she'd been waiting for it. Shouts filled the air, "Police! Down now!" And Tyler's voice cracked from upstairs in a panic she had never heard before. He came running down, hands up, eyes wide with disbelief as masked officers flooded the room. Dana stood in the corner, silent, arms crossed over her chest like armor, watching him crumble. The mug on the table sat untouched, but it might as well have been covered in blood. Officers pushed Tyler to the ground, cuffing him while he yelled her name, confused, betrayed, desperate. Dana didn't flinch, didn't answer, didn't blink. For a moment, he looked at her like a lost child, and it nearly broke her, but she held firm. Morales entered seconds later, nodding to her before ordering the scene to be secured. The house was swarming now, filled with evidence bags, flashlights, and reality. It was finally over, or at least the beginning of the end. While Tyler was being read his rights, another team arrived at Brooke's apartment across town. They knocked once, then entered with a warrant, catching her mid-phone call with her hair half-tied and a duffel bag on the bed. She screamed when they pulled the phone from her hand and started questioning her about gloves, a gas bill, and duct tape. Officers recovered texts, receipts, and the same timeline Dana had already laid out in her statement. Brooke broke down almost instantly, claiming Tyler had manipulated her from the beginning. But her fingerprints and her voice said otherwise. At the precinct, Morales watched the confession unfold on a split screen while Dana sat in another room with a blanket over her shoulders. Brooke's voice trembled as she admitted she was supposed to come back the next morning to finish what they started. That sentence alone was enough to secure her fate. Dana listened from the next room, her heart numb, her expression unreadable. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of what came next, she was ready for it. Back at the station, Dana sat in a quiet interview room, a cup of untouched water in front of her. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, but her breathing had finally started to slow. Morales stepped in gently, his voice softer now, and told her both suspects were in custody. He praised her bravery, but Dana barely heard him. Her mind was still replaying Tyler's eyes as he realized she had outsmarted him, a mix of shock and something that looked almost like fear. She gave her full statement in one clear run, holding nothing back, her voice steady as if she had rehearsed it in her head for days. She described the tea, the whispering, the recordings, every moment of performance and every second of terror. The detective nodded, scribbling notes, occasionally glancing at her with a mix of disbelief and admiration. When she finished, he told her the evidence was overwhelming, they had more than enough for prosecution. Dana nodded, but there was no relief yet, only the weight of truth sitting heavily in her chest. The arraignment came fast, held in a crowded courtroom that smelled of ink and old wood. Dana sat in the back, watching as Tyler was brought in wearing orange, shackled, and pale. His lawyer requested bail, arguing that Tyler had no prior record and was simply confused and emotional. But the DA stood up, listing the recorded confession, the toxicology, and the forged insurance policy. When Brooke appeared on screen via video link, the room fell into complete silence. The judge looked down at the evidence and denied bail without hesitation, citing premeditation and risk to the victim. Dana closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to cry, but to breathe. She felt the floor under her feet for the first time in weeks, solid and real. As Tyler was let out, he turned his head once, searching for her in the crowd. She didn't move. There was nothing left in her to give him, not pity, not forgiveness, not even a glance. Word spread fast, and within hours her phone lit up with messages from cousins, neighbors, and friends she hadn't heard from in years. Some offered support, others asked intrusive questions, but a few, unbelievably, defended Tyler. Her sister left a voicemail saying, "You raised him, Dana. This is on you." Dana deleted the message without listening to the rest. The truth was, part of her had already asked herself that question 1,000 times. What had she missed? Where did it all start? She didn't answer anyone. The silence was her sanctuary now, the only thing that still belonged to her. Holidays were cancelled before they began, traditions erased by betrayal. The thought of setting a table with an empty seat next to her made her nauseous. She let the Christmas boxes stay in the attic, untouched. If this was what healing looked like, then she would start from ashes. The district attorney expanded the indictment the moment Heritage Mutual's legal team delivered a thick folder proving Tyler had purchased the policy online, paid the premiums with his own debit card, and signed Dana's name with a pixel-perfect copy lifted from a mortgage PDF. Prosecutors alleged that the new $2 million policy, plus an accidental death rider, showed clear financial motive and premeditation beyond the poisoning itself, and the judge accepted the amendment without hesitation. Reporters latched onto the headline "Life Insurance Murder Plot," splashing Dana's face across evening broadcasts while pundits debated how a son could monetize his mother's heartbeat. Dana watched the coverage alone in her motel room, remote clutched in her fist, feeling the story slide from personal nightmare to public spectacle, yet each breaking graphic also confirmed the law was now chasing every dollar he had hoped to steal. The next morning, Heritage Mutual formally joined the criminal case as a victim of fraud, freezing the policy and pledging expert witnesses who would testify that no claim would ever be paid. When Dana arrived at the courthouse to sign additional affidavits, a corporate attorney from the insurer thanked her for exposing the scheme and promised to cover her relocation costs under a victim assistance clause unheard of until now. The gesture felt surreal, but she accepted, recognizing that even corporations had seen the humanity her own child had discarded. Outside, microphones surrounded her like thorns. She said only that she trusted the system and walked away. Back in the DA's office, an investigator slid a new photo across the table, Tyler smiling at the bank the day he bought prepaid cards to fund the policy, and Dana realized that every breadcrumb he left was another nail in his legal coffin. For the first time since the tea, she tasted something close to vindication. A week later, cyberforensics experts traced Tyler's laptop activity minute by minute, presenting a digital map that showed late-night searches for undetectable sedatives, inheritance laws if parent dies suddenly, and payout timeline after contestability period. They even reconstructed a deleted spreadsheet titled "New Life Budget" listing beachfront rentals in Cancun and a Tesla Model Y, glaring proof of a future he had planned with deadly precision. Morales laid the printed screenshots before Dana, each timestamp a dagger that cut deeper than the last, yet each also proof she had not imagined the malice. The audit team retrieved surveillance camera stills of Tyler buying zolpidem at 3 pharmacies under different customer profiles, stitching together a procurement trail that left the defense scrambling for explanations. Prosecutors smiled grimly, knowing the jury would see greed rendered in ones and zeros. Dana felt both smaller and stronger reading those pages, smaller because the betrayal was now quantified, stronger because the truth was unassailable. When the forensic accountant explained how Tyler attempted to add himself as joint owner on her savings account, only to be flagged by the bank's fraud filter, she actually laughed, a short brittle sound that surprised everyone in the room. Laughter turned to steel when she signed yet another witness statement, her signature bold and unshaking. As she walked out, the accountant whispered that embezzlers usually leave sloppy footprints, but murderers often leave tracks a mile wide. Tyler had done both. Dana stepped into the hallway feeling the burden of proof shift entirely onto her son's shoulders where it belonged. Facing 20 years on conspiracy and attempted murder charges, Brooke crumbled during her second interrogation and asked for a deal, her eyeliner smeared like wilted ink as she confessed every detail. She described Tyler's original idea, his excitement when the policy was approved, and how he rehearsed his 911 call to sound devastated, even practicing sobs in the bathroom mirror. In exchange for a reduced sentence of 10 years, she surrendered her phone, producing text chains where Tyler bragged, "Once mom's gone, we're set for life, Mexico, margaritas, no regrets." Prosecutors accepted, and her taped confession became the prosecution's silver bullet, sealing any cracks in the case that Tyler's lawyer hoped to exploit. When Dana listened to the playback, Brooke's voice sounded thin and frightened, but also brutally honest, each word hammering another board across Tyler's escape route. At a pretrial hearing, Brooke took the stand in a pale jumpsuit and, without meeting Dana's eyes, recited the plan step by step, her tone flat but her hands trembling so badly the bailiff offered water. She admitted she bought latex gloves, duct tape, and a crowbar to stage the break-in, all on security cameras, all paid with Tyler's credit card, sealing the narrative like a lid. The defense tried to paint her as the mastermind, but timestamps contradicted that fiction, and her tears, real or staged, only underscored Tyler's callous texts. Dana sat in the gallery, spine straight, feeling waves of sorrow for the girl who chose greed over conscience, yet none of it softening her resolve. As court adjourned, reporters rushed for comment, but Dana simply walked past, the echo of Brooke's confession ringing louder than any headline. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor played Brooke's audio confession, her voice echoing through the speakers with chilling clarity. Jurors leaned forward when they heard Tyler's text messages read aloud, especially the one that said, "Once mom's gone, we're millionaires, Mexico here we come." Dana sat motionless, hands folded in her lap, her heart aching but her eyes dry. It no longer hurt the way it used to, now it burned, fierce and focused. She watched the jurors' faces shift from curiosity to disgust. Tyler stared at the table, refusing to meet her gaze, but she kept her eyes locked on him, daring him to look up. The prosecution continued, showing security footage of the pharmacy purchases and timestamps matching every step of their plan. Dana's voice appeared in a recording too, calmly narrating her actions the night she pretended to drink the tea. The jury heard it all, the fear, the strategy, the strength. When the video ended, no one in that room could unsee what they had just witnessed. Tyler's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, suggesting he had acted out of financial pressure and emotional instability. But 2 independent psychologists testified that he was fully aware of his actions, showing no signs of mental illness, just cold, calculated motive. The defense's final witness, a distant cousin, claimed Tyler had always felt neglected, but the jury looked unconvinced. Dana had worked 3 jobs to raise him, and now the truth was being dragged into the light. There was nothing left for the defense to stand on. Closing arguments painted Tyler as a man who valued money more than blood, a son who saw his mother not as a person but as a payout. The prosecutor's voice cracked only once, saying, "She raised him, loved him, and he tried to bury her for a bank transfer." Dana felt her hands tighten into fists beneath the table, not out of rage, but resolve. The judge gave final instructions, and the jury was sent out. For the first time in weeks, Dana exhaled fully, knowing she had done everything possible. The jury returned in just over 4 hours, their expressions hard and unreadable as they filed back into the room. Dana's heart pounded like a war drum, but she kept her face still, her eyes steady. The foreman stood and delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts, attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and identity theft. A gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by total silence. Tyler's shoulders collapsed, and for a second, he looked like a child lost in a storm. He turned toward Dana as if searching for something: mercy, understanding, or maybe just memory, but she didn't flinch. The judge thanked the jury, then ordered Tyler taken into custody immediately without bail. Chains clinked as he was led away, and Dana watched the door close behind him like the end of a long, brutal chapter. She stood, adjusted her coat, and walked out into the cold afternoon air. Justice had spoken, but healing would take much longer. The courthouse filled again for sentencing, the air thick with anticipation and unresolved grief. Dana sat near the aisle, steady but pale, as the prosecutor requested 35 years without parole, citing calculated betrayal and a life insurance motive. Tyler's lawyer begged for leniency, claiming youthful desperation, yet even he sounded defeated, his arguments falling flat in the silent room. When the judge pronounced 35 years, Tyler's face crumpled and a single sob broke through his composure as chains rattled around his wrists. Dana felt moisture sting her eyes, not for the son who had tried to kill her, but for the boy he once was and would never be again. Tyler turned, tears streaking down his cheeks, and mouthed "Mom" as deputies moved him toward the exit, but Dana remained motionless, her hands folded like stone in her lap. She knew forgiveness might come someday, yet not here, not now, not while the raw wound still bled. The judge thanked her for her courage, words she barely heard over the roar of her own heartbeat. Reporters outside clamored for statements, but Dana slipped through a side door, coat wrapped tight, craving quiet more than headlines. The cold winter sun struck her face, and for the first time she noticed its warmth instead of its glare. 2 weeks later, a prison bus carried Tyler north to the maximum security facility where he would begin his sentence, a place of towering fences and endless gray corridors. Dana watched footage on the evening news, seeing him shuffle in chains surrounded by guards, his orange jumpsuit stark against the snow-dusted ground. The commentator spoke of rehabilitation programs and inmate statistics, but to Dana it was simply the final confirmation that the threat was gone. She switched off the television, sat at her kitchen table, and let the quiet wash over her like a long-denied lullaby. No footsteps upstairs, no tea brewing in the kitchen, only the hum of the refrigerator and the steady beat of her own breathing. That night she packed Tyler's childhood items, soccer trophies, school drawings, forgotten action figures, into cardboard boxes and taped them shut without opening the lids. She labeled each one with a black marker, storage, unsure if she would ever look inside again. The house felt lighter with every box removed, as if betrayal itself weighed something tangible that could finally be lifted. When the last box was sealed, she placed them in the attic and closed the door with a soft click that sounded like an amen. Then she brewed herself a fresh cup of chamomile and drank it to the final drop, trusting its warmth for the first time in months. The following morning Dana met with her attorney, a gray-haired woman who listened without judgment as Dana described her new priorities. They drafted a revised will leaving her assets to 2 charities, a scholarship fund for single mothers and a support network for crime survivors, explicitly disinheriting Tyler in language as clear as etched glass. Dana initialed each clause, her pen strokes firm, feeling a sense of reclamation with every signature. When the final page was notarized, she exhaled, realizing she had severed the last legal tie her son could ever pull to hurt her again. The attorney slid the documents into a fireproof safe and pressed Dana's hand gently, acknowledging both loss and liberation. Outside the law office, the sky shone crisp and blue, carrying none of the heaviness she expected. She walked to a nearby cafe, ordered a latte, and sat by the window watching strangers pass, each on a journey unknown to her but suddenly beautiful in its mundanity. She opened her journal and wrote a single line, "My story continues on my terms." Then she closed the cover, paid her bill, and stepped onto the sidewalk with a lighter stride. The city thrummed around her, not with menace but with possibility, and for the first time in a long while, Dana let herself believe in tomorrow. Dana walked through each room of the house with a clipboard in hand and a quiet ache in her chest. Every corner held a memory: Tyler's first birthday cake smashed on the floor, his drawing still taped behind the pantry door, the scratch on the wall from a tantrum she had long forgiven. But now, those memories weighed her down instead of lifting her. She contacted a real estate agent the next morning and listed the house, asking for a quick sale with no sentimental attachments. When the sign went up on the front lawn, she stood behind the curtain and didn't cry. The offers came fast, and within a week, she accepted one from a young couple expecting their first child. As she signed the final papers, she felt both relief and grief collapse into one long exhale. She donated half the profit to a local organization that supported victims of domestic crimes, choosing anonymity. The other half she placed in a separate account, labeled New Start, a name that gave her courage. That night, she left the porch light on for the last time, locked the door, and dropped the keys into an envelope without looking back. Dana relocated to Flagstaff, Arizona, where no one knew her past, her pain, or her last name. She revived her maiden name, Green, and signed her new lease with hands that no longer trembled. Her new home was a small adobe cottage nestled near the San Francisco peaks, modest but filled with sunlight and quiet. The neighbors waved but didn't pry, and Dana found comfort in their easy distance. She began each morning walking a trail behind her street, breathing air that felt honest. She shopped at local markets, planted herbs in clay pots, and learned the rhythm of a life no longer shadowed by fear. Her smile was slow to return, but one morning it came naturally when she caught herself humming while watering basil. She opened a new bank account, filled it with purpose and clean beginnings. She no longer waited for the sound of keys turning with malice. Here, the silence meant peace, not danger. Her bungalow had a small porch with 2 rocking chairs, though she only used one. She painted the shutters a pale sage and hung wind chimes that sang on breezy days. Inside, she furnished with care, choosing soft tones and second-hand pieces that didn't carry someone else's sadness. She kept her bedroom minimal, a bookshelf beside the bed, and a journal always open to a blank page. Each room reflected a woman who had learned to live again without apology. Dana spent most evenings reading or baking, her kitchen warm with cinnamon and quiet. She kept no photos on display, no reminders of what had been taken from her. But she placed a single quote above the fireplace: "Not all storms come to disrupt your life, some come to clear your path." When the wind blew strong through the canyon, she lit candles and whispered thank you to no one in particular. And in that solitude, she felt whole. Dana started weekly counseling at a small clinic downtown, the room smelling faintly of lavender and old books. The therapist, Dr. Patel, listened without judgment as Dana unpacked layers of guilt, anger, and residual fear that still woke her at 3 a.m. She learned grounding techniques, breathing exercises, and the radical idea that surviving made her neither weak nor unforgiving. Slowly she practiced trusting her own instincts again, relearning the difference between intuition and anxiety. Each session ended with homework to celebrate one small victory, and by month's end Dana could name 5 without hesitation. Outside the clinic, Dana would sit in her car and journal the breakthroughs before driving home, letting the words settle like clean rain over scorched earth. She no longer questioned every smile from a stranger or flinched at the clang of silverware in cafes. Trust returned in increments, the way dawn warms a landscape minute by minute. Dr. Patel reminded her that healing wasn't a straight line, and Dana found comfort in the permission to stumble. Most nights she slept through until sunrise, proof enough that trauma could loosen its grip. One Saturday, Dana volunteered at the local senior center to teach a class on financial safety, her nerves buzzing like fluorescent lights until the first grateful face smiled back. She explained how to spot phishing scams, freeze credit, and read insurance fine print, skills she wished she'd known sooner. The seniors asked questions, took notes, and thanked her with homemade cookies that tasted of cinnamon and hope. Walking to her car afterward, Dana realized she felt lighter than she had in years, as if sharing her scars transformed them into armor for others. She signed up to return every month. Volunteering became her grounding ritual, Mondays at the food bank, Thursdays reading to children at the library, Saturdays at the senior center. Service rewired her narrative from victim to advocate, from betrayed mother to resilient teacher. People began greeting her by her restored name, Green, unburdened by the shadow of past headlines. Each act of kindness stitched a new thread into the tapestry of her life, vibrant where it had once been frayed. Even the wind chimes on her porch seemed to sing clearer. Thanksgiving arrived cold and bright, snow dusting the peaks while Dana prepared a modest dinner for 3 new friends from her volunteer circles. She set the table with thrift store china, lit beeswax candles, and played soft jazz that filled the bungalow with unfamiliar peace. They shared stories of small triumphs, lost pounds, found kittens, overdue degrees, and clinked glasses of sparkling cider to futures reclaimed. Dana served pumpkin pie still warm, laughing when it cracked, because imperfect sweetness felt exactly right. No one mentioned the past, yet their gentle gratitude honored everything she had survived. When her guests left, Dana stepped onto the porch and breathed the crisp mountain air, the Milky Way bright above the dark pines. She wrapped herself in a quilt and rocked slowly, listening to the wind chimes whisper through the still night. There were no letters from prison, no anonymous calls, no weight on her chest. Inside, the last candle flickered out, but she felt only warmth. For the first time in years, the holiday ended without dread, and in the hush that followed, she murmured a simple promise: the worst storms were behind her, and dawn would keep its word. A month after Thanksgiving, Dana gathered every unopened letter Tyler had sent from prison, piled them in her fireplace, and struck a single match. Flames curled the envelopes into ash while snowflakes drifted past the window, soft and indifferent. She watched until only gray dust remained, feeling the past loosen its claws with each crackle. Then she swept the ashes into a metal tin, stepped outside, and scattered them in the garden bed where spring bulbs slept beneath the frost. The gesture wasn't about vengeance, it was about refusing to let his words shape even a corner of her future. That night she wrote a final entry in the journal she had carried through court hearings and motel rooms: "This chapter closes under my terms." She tucked the notebook onto a shelf and crawled into bed without double-checking locks or replaying recordings. Dreams came quietly, filled with pine scent and distant church bells instead of sirens. When she woke, dawn painted the ceiling peach, and for the first time she didn't brace for bad news. Peace, she realized, wasn't sudden, it was a muscle she had trained into strength. On the first day of the new year, Dana hiked a ridge trail before sunrise, boots crunching over brittle grass as the horizon blushed pale rose. At the summit she poured steaming coffee from a thermos and watched light flood the valley, revealing rooftops and winding roads that now belonged to her story. She whispered a prayer not for forgetting but for living well, then unfolded a small sheet of paper listing her hopes: finish a 5K, adopt a rescue dog, learn to paint desert sunsets. She signed the bottom with her maiden name, sealing intention with identity. The list fluttered in the breeze before she folded it back into her jacket pocket like a promise kept close. On the descent she noticed footprints beside hers. Another hiker had gone ahead, proof that journeys overlap even when walked alone. At home she framed a blank canvas on the living room wall, the first stroke still unknown yet brightly possible. She brewed chamomile tea, smiling at the irony, and savored it without fear. Outside, wind chimes offered a gentle chorus, no longer a warning system but a song. Dana pressed a hand to her heart, felt it beat steady and true, and understood that survival had given way to something rarer: genuine contentment.